Why did the demons ask Jesus to let them enter the pigs? The answer is more disturbing than what you were taught. If you're not afraid of discomfort, this channel is for you. Subscribe and comment below, and tell us where you're listening from. There was a man who was already dead, even though he was still breathing. He lived among the tombs, on the hillside overlooking the sea, in the only place where no one would come looking for him because no one wanted to find him. There, where the dead were buried, a living man slept. And when night fell, that hillside stopped belonging to the living entirely. They had tied him up. Not once, but many times. They put shackles on his ankles and chains on his wrists. Thick iron, the kind used to restrain beasts, and each time the iron gave way. It wasn't opened with a key, it broke. It snapped like a thread between two fingers. The villagers would later find the broken links scattered among the stones, twisted, impossible, and they would look at them without understanding what kind of force could do that to metal, and without wanting to imagine what sort of creature lived inside that man's skin. Because it was not a man's strength. No man breaks those chains. Something inside him was stronger than anything a blacksmith could forge, and that force did not want to be restrained. During the day sometimes there was calm, but at night, among the tombs, it would begin. He would pick up a stone from the ground, any stone, and strike his own body with it. He would cut himself, wounding his arms, his chest, his face, and scream. A long scream that rolled down the hillside, crossed the water, slipped through the cracks in the doors, and settled in the middle of the houses like a guest no one had invited. In those houses, frightened mothers pressed their children to their chests and prayed. But they did not pray for the terrifying scream to stop. They prayed for it to continue, because as long as he was screaming, they knew exactly where he was. It was the silence that was frightening. Silence meant he had moved, that maybe he was coming down. No one could control him. Absolutely no one dared to take that path. He was alone, in the only way a human being can be truly alone. Not just because there was no one nearby, but because everyone who was nearby would have preferred him to be dead. Alone among those who remembered him and wished to forget him. Alone among the graves of people who, at least, had the right to a proper burial. He did not. He kept on breathing, and no one knew anymore how many years he had been like that, nameless, homeless, without a single human hand daring to touch him. And that morning over the sea, still gray with dawn, a small boat began to cross the water toward that shore. What few dare to say out loud is this: when what was coming in that boat finally reached land, the things that inhabited that man did not attack him, did not throw themselves at him, did not curse him, did not challenge him, did not try to destroy him. They asked him for something, they negotiated with him. And he said yes. Pause your thoughts there for a moment, because this changes the whole scene. It wasn't a clean miracle, it wasn't a command and an ending. It was a negotiation, a deal between the Son of the Most High and a multitude of demons on a pagan shore over impure sand. And those who were asking knew exactly who they were talking to. They knew his name, they knew his power, they knew what he could do to them. And even so, they did not ask for mercy to escape. They asked him for something else, something stranger, something that will force you to rethink everything you thought you knew about fear, about hell, and about what evil truly fears. I'm going to return to that yes, but that yes can't be understood without knowing why he crossed the entire sea to get here. And the answer was waiting in the boat, even before touching the sand. He had come from the other side of the sea, from the shore where people knew the scriptures, where the Sabbath was observed, where a pig was an abomination that no pious man would touch, not even with the tip of his staff. That boat crossed all that water at night, even went through a storm, and arrived at this shore, the wrong shore. Land of foreigners, land of temples to other gods. Land where pigs grazed by the thousands on the hillsides, fat, peaceful, thousands of unclean animals fattening under the sun. Ask yourself why. Why cross all those vast treacherous waters, endure the fury of the raging storm just to arrive at the most impure place in this entire region? Why come all the way here, where nothing was clean, where nothing was holy, where not a single teacher of the law would ever dare to set foot? Hold on to that question, because the answer was waiting among the tombs. Out of everyone on the boat, of all the men who were in it, only one stepped onto the sand. As soon as his foot finally touched the shore, before he could even take a single step, before he could utter a single word, something moved up on the hillside. The man from the tombs was already running toward him. He was running, coming down the slope among the stones of the tombs at full speed, and the broken chains still hung from his ankles, scraping against the rock, sending up sparks and dust with every leap. A naked man, his skin covered in dust and dried blood, with old wounds and new wounds. The scabs torn open again by the run, his eyes. Imagine the eyes of that man coming down the hillside toward a stranger who had just set foot on his land. Anyone would have run. Anyone from the boat would have backed away toward the water. This is what the whole village feared. This is what broke chains and came straight, at full speed, toward the only one who stood still on the sand waiting for him. And here is the first thing that doesn't fit in the scene. He wasn't running to attack, he was running to kneel. He reached him and collapsed onto his knees, his face pressed to the ground with fine dust clinging to the blood on his forehead, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. And from that throat, ruined by so many nights of screaming, a voice came out. But it wasn't the voice of a man asking for help. It wasn't "save me." It wasn't "help me." It was something else, a voice that already knew him before seeing him. "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" And there is what no one stops to notice. The whole village didn't know what that man was. Those who tried to chain him didn't understand what they were fighting against. To them, he was a madman, a disgrace, a beast. But the thing that spoke through his mouth knew the exact name, the exact title, the exact lineage of the one who had just stepped off the boat. It knew more than the village. It knew more than the priests on the other side of the sea. It recognized him in the very first instant, before anyone said a single word. And the next thing that voice said was not a threat, it was a plea. "I beg you by God, do not torment me." The one who kneels, who begs, who pleads not to be harmed, is the one who is afraid. And that is what no one ever taught you about this story. The darkest thing on that hillside, the force that broke iron, that drove a man mad, that kept an entire region barricading their doors at night. That thing was afraid. It was terrified. And for the first time, what terrified it was standing before it, in the sand, looking at it in silence. But afraid of what? What could possibly terrify a demon? That question will stay with you until the end of this story. Keep it close. He looked at him and asked a question, just one. "What is your name?" A simple question, the simplest of all. It is the very question you ask anyone you meet along the way. And yet, the question that village had stopped asking him years ago, because to them he no longer had a name. He was the one from the graves, the madman on the hillside. He was a thing that screamed in the darkness. No one asked him his name, because no one believed there was anyone left inside to ask. He did ask the question, as if there was still a man inside, as if it was truly worth knowing. And the voice replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Legion. Let that word sink slowly all the way to the bottom. In that land, under that sky, a legion was not a vague idea. It was not just a way of saying several. It was a word for soldiers. It was the word for the very same army that occupied that very land, that marched along those roads raising dust with their heavy boots, that collected those harsh taxes, that left a helpless man nailed to a cross by the roadside, for everyone to see as they passed by, his head hanging down, the flies, the silence of those who lowered their gaze and kept walking. A legion was thousands of armed men moving as a single body, crushing everything in their path. And that was what inhabited a single naked man, kneeling in the sand. Many, so many that a single name could no longer contain them. There were so many of them that the name they gave was not a name, but an uncounted number. Now you understand why no chain could ever hold him. You weren't just tying up a man. You were trying to bind a multitude. Every link they closed had to withstand the weight of an entire crowd pushing outward. That's why they burst. That's why iron meant nothing. He wasn't a strong man. He was a battlefield with human skin. Stop here. This changes everything you thought you knew about that scene. When you imagined a single demon, you pictured something manageable. Now imagine a vast multitude, an entire army compressed within the bones of a single man. For years, day and night, without a single moment of rest. Imagine what that did to him on the inside. Imagine why he struck himself with stones. Maybe the pain from outside was the only thing that for a moment could drown out the noise inside. But something breaks here. Something that doesn't make sense. There were many. They were a multitude that broke chains. They were an army. And even so, they begged on their knees, pleading. All that strength, all those numbers, all that power to destroy a man from the inside, and yet on their knees in the sand, begging not to be harmed. Something doesn't add up. If you were so strong that no man in the region could overpower you, why do you kneel before this one who arrived alone, without an army, without weapons, in a small boat? Because there was something they feared more than anything a man could do to them, something greater than chains, greater than pain, greater than death itself. And for the first time in a long time, that something was standing in front of them, in silence, waiting. And then they begged, not for their freedom, not to escape to the sea and flee to another land. They begged for one very specific thing, and this is where the story becomes truly strange, where a crack opens in the ground and through that crack you can see something huge and dark beneath it all. They begged him not to send them into the abyss, not to send them to the depths, to the bottomless place. And in another of the ancient voices that preserves this same scene, they begged him for something even more disturbing. They pleaded with him not to torment them. Before the appointed time. Before the appointed time. And there is the crack. Those three words are the deepest part of the whole story. Before the appointed time means that there is a time. It means that those beings were not begging to be spared from punishment. They knew that punishment existed. They knew it was reserved for them. They had a date, an hour marked on some calendar that no man can read. A final day that had not yet come, but that would undoubtedly arrive. And their terror at that exact moment was not the punishment itself, but that it might come early, that he might bring it forward, that with a single word he could break the calendar of the universe, split time in two, and cast them right now, today, into a place they did not even dare to name. Think about what that means. Those creatures knew they were going to lose. They were not negotiating for their victory. They had lost the war before it even began, and they knew it. The only thing they were negotiating was the postponement of their defeat. A few more days, a few more hours, a little more time outside, before the bottom. They knew who was in charge, they knew how it all ended. And they begged, not to escape the end, but to delay it. And to delay it, they asked for a body. On the hillside, not far away, a herd was grazing, an enormous herd, nearly 2,000 pigs rooting in the dry earth, grunting, indifferent, completely unaware that just a few steps away, something was being decided that no creature on that hillside could possibly understand. 2,000 animals fattening under the sun, not knowing they only had minutes left. And that is the other sign the story plants without raising its voice, without underlining it. Pigs. 2,000. Remember where you are. Those pigs tell you exactly what kind of land you are standing on. Impure land, land of foreigners. And later on, those same pigs will tell you exactly what kind of people live there and what truly matters to them. Send us into the pigs, they begged. Let us enter them. Do not cast us out of this land. Do not send us into the abyss. Let us enter those animals. Why? Why would a force capable of destroying a man from within, capable of breaking iron chains, capable of terrorizing an entire region for years, beg for permission to enter pigs? Because for those beings, being outside a body was already a form of torment. They needed a place, any place at all. flesh to hide in, to hold on to tightly so they wouldn't fall. A roof, even if it was just a pig's roof, was better than the void, better than the abyss, and better than the time they so greatly feared. Being without a body for them was already the beginning of falling to the bottom, and they would do anything to cling to anything that would keep them away from that bottom for just a moment longer. And now comes the moment that no one wants to look at directly. It's the moment that the gentler versions of this story quickly gloss over. With a polite smile, as if it weren't there at all. He heard them. He heard the plea of evil. He weighed what they were asking and responded. He granted them what they asked for. Go. A single word. Read it again, slowly, until it truly makes you uncomfortable. Evil asked for a favor, and the favor was granted. He did not destroy them in that instant. He didn't erase them from the world with a gesture, even though he could have, even though they themselves feared exactly that. He listened carefully to what they wanted and gave them his agreement. There is a hidden command in that concession, a purpose that escapes us at first. But before searching for its meaning, before explaining it, let us dwell upon the raw scandal of the scene. The Son of the Most High, on a pagan shore, upon impure sand, surrounded by tombs, accedes to the desperate plea of a legion of demons. And in that very instant, the man was completely transformed. Not with violence, not with a scream. There was a moment, just one, when his whole body trembled. A tremor ran through him from his shoulders to his feet, like someone finally letting go of a burden they had carried for years without being able to release it, like someone expelling something from inside that had been there so long they had forgotten what it was like to breathe without it. And then stillness. His face was still pressed against the ground, but he was breathing differently now, slower and deeper. His chest was rising and falling with a calm that his body hadn't known in years. Like a man waking from a sleep so long and so deep, he no longer remembered he was asleep. His hands, which just a moment before had been digging into the sand, slowly opened. And on the hillside above, the 2,000 began to move. First one lifted its head, then 10, then the whole herd, all at once, as if they were a single body, as if an invisible command had passed through all of them at the same time. They lifted their heads high and started to sprint forward. Not to scatter, not to flee in all directions like a herd of panicked cattle. To run in a single direction, together, downhill, toward the water. Just imagine the thunderous sound. 2,000 massive, heavy bodies going down a slope at the same time, hooves pounding the parched, dry earth, a thunder of flesh and dust. The dust rising in a thick brown cloud that blocks the sun and darkens the hillside. The shrieks, sharp, thousands at once, blending into a single deafening scream. And underneath all of that deafening noise, steadily growing louder, the sound of the sea approaching. Closer and closer, lower and lower. They reached the edge of the cliff and they did not come to a stop. They threw themselves into the water, one by one in endless succession, row after row, the entire herd plunging from the cliff like a living avalanche, a thundering waterfall of flesh falling into the sea, and the water received them and closed over them. The piercing shrieks gradually faded away in the water, one after another. First many, then few, then just one, distant, slowly drowning. Then nothing. Silence. The same abyss they feared, the dark water that closes and returns nothing of what it swallows. They asked for a body so as not to sink to the bottom, and the body fell all the same. They ran desperately with every ounce of strength they had toward the water they had pleaded so fervently to avoid, as if not even inside the bodies of the pigs could they contain what they were, as if their mere presence was already an inevitable sentence of death for any living creature that dared to harbor them. They asked for more time, and instead, found the bottom of the water in just a few seconds, and up above, on the high hillside, a lone man remained sitting in the dust, lost in a heavy silence. The heavy, broken chains lay beside him on the ground as he quietly looked down toward the vast sea, now calm again, toward the water where just a moment before 2,000 beasts had been running, and where now there was absolutely nothing. Only the surface, perfectly smooth, returning the reflection of the sky. Those who tended the herd saw everything. The shepherds, standing off to the side, paralyzed and not understanding, helplessly watched as everything they were supposed to care for vanished beneath the water. Everything their entire livelihood depended on. And when the last shriek faded beneath the surface, when silence returned, they dropped what they were holding, the staffs, the ropes, and ran. Not toward the sea, not toward the man. They ran toward the village, toward the houses, toward the owners of the pigs. They had to tell what had happened. They had to say what they had just lost. And as they ran, they left behind the man who for years had been the village's nightmare, the one who broke chains, who screamed in the night, who wounded himself with stones among the tombs. They left him behind, sitting, silent, calm for the first time in years, healed. But they were not running to announce a healing. They were not running to shout that the madman from the hillside had become a man again. They were running to announce a loss. They were running to tally up the accounts. They were hurrying back to report that something there on the shore had cost them an absolute fortune. And here, before the village arrives, I want you to linger for just a moment longer. With the striking image of that man alone on the hillside, someone approached. A kind stranger handed him a tunic, a soft piece of clean cloth. And for the first time in years, that body, which had only known nakedness, dust, the scorching heat of the sun, and the freezing night, felt the touch of something fresh and clean against his skin. It was a simple piece of cloth, perhaps rough, but clean. And he took it and put it on very slowly, awkwardly, like someone relearning a gesture they had forgotten long ago, like someone who has to remember exactly how a man covers himself. He sat down, clothed, calm, and in his right mind. The man who lived among the dead was now sitting among the living. Look at his hands. The same hands that broke heavy iron, that tore off cold shackles, and that closed around rough stones to hurt himself. Now they rest open on his knees, perfectly still, without trembling. Take a look at his wrists, and look at his ankles. The marks from the shackles are still there, deep red grooves in the skin, the trace of all the times they tried to restrain him and failed. Those marks are not going to fade anytime soon. He will carry them for a long time. But the iron is no longer on him. It is beside him, on the ground, broken, rusting, useless. A pile of metal that was never good for anything, that never held him, that could never stand against what he had inside, and that now, suddenly, is no longer needed. Enjoy this calm, because it will last very little, because now the village is coming. They are coming up the path from below, the owners of the pigs, the neighbors, the curious men and women who left their tasks unfinished as soon as the shepherds arrived, breathless, telling the impossible. They come because they need to see it with their own eyes. They come without really knowing what they are going to find, and they find it. They see the man, that man, the one who so many nights forced them to barricade their doors and hold their children close, the one no one could restrain, the terror of the hillside. They see him sitting on the ground, clothed, speaking with a human voice, a calm voice, looking them in the eyes without shouting, without foaming at the mouth, without throwing himself at them. The impossible, made flesh, sitting before them in the dust. And what do they feel? And here, at this exact point, lies the true wound of this whole story. And the wound is not in the possessed man. It was never in him. They did not feel joy. They did not run to embrace the man they had just gotten back. They did not fall to their knees to give thanks for the neighbor who had come back from the dead. They did not weep with relief. They felt fear, and behind the fear, almost immediately, they started doing the math. Stop here. Stay in this moment, because this is the darkest part of the whole hillside. And it has no horns, no chains, no legion's voice. A multitude of demons knelt before him, pleading, trembling, recognizing who he was in the very first instant. But these people, these ordinary people, men with homes, with families, with trades, with temples to their gods, with their flocks and their coins, when faced with the same power, with the same presence that terrified the legion, did not kneel. They calculated 2,000 pigs. That is what weighed on their minds while they had before them a man brought back to life. Not the miracle, not the neighbor restored to health, but the price, the cost, the herd lost at the bottom of the sea, the livestock that would never return, The coins sunk forever beneath the still water. They added up what each animal was worth, multiplied by 2,000, subtracted it from what they had, and reached a cold, quick, business-like conclusion that the man who crossed the sea was simply too expensive for them. What kind of power is that, they wondered, that heals a madman but ruins you? What kind of visitor is this before whom even demons tremble, and yet who leaves your economy in ruins in a single morning? They didn't want to understand it, didn't want to get closer, didn't want to think about what it meant that a single man could do what they had just witnessed. They only wanted one thing, for him to leave, to get out of their land as soon as possible, before it cost them anything more, before he touched anything else they had. And they asked him to do so. And notice the contrast. The legion asked for permission to stay in a body, to not leave that land. The village asked him to leave the entire land. The demons wanted to stay close, to cling to flesh, not to fall. The people wanted the power of God to distance itself as far away from them as possible, to cross back over the sea and never return. And so I have to ask you a very important question, and I need you to let it sink in before you keep listening. Who was more afraid of Jesus that day? The demons or the neighbors? Don't answer too quickly. That village looked at the greatest good it would ever see in its life and did the math. And before you judge them, ask yourself just one thing. What would you ask him to leave untouched? What part of your life do you guard so closely that deep down you'd rather not even God touch it? What flock of yours would you not be willing to lose, not even in exchange for a miracle? Write it down below in a single line. Not for me, for you. I want to read what you're capable of admitting. And he didn't argue. He didn't insist. He didn't beg them to let him stay to teach them, to show them more, to convince them. He didn't perform another sign to soften their hearts. He simply turned around and walked back to the boat. That should make you uncomfortable too. He respects the door that a man closes. They asked him to leave, and he left. The most formidable and greatest power that land on this earth had ever known withdrew without a reproach, without a threat, without a harsh word. Because he does not stay where he is no longer wanted. He crossed all that water, went through a storm, reached the most impure corner of the region to save a single man, and leaves whole, in silence, because of the decision of a frightened village that preferred their pigs. But there is one last scene, the one that truly closes the oldest wound in this story and opens another that will stay with you long after this is over. As he was getting back into the boat, the healed man came running, once again running down that same hillside, but this time without chains hanging from him, without screams, without blood, without the dust of tombs. A man, clothed, healthy, running toward the water. And when he arrived, he begged him, just as the demons had begged a few hours earlier on that same shore. Now he was the one begging. But what he asked for was the exact opposite. They begged to stay on earth. He begged to leave it. Let me go with you. And it makes perfect sense. Think about it from inside his skin, from within his story. That village had bound him. That village had feared him. That village had let him live among the tombs for years, without a name, without a roof, without a helping hand. And now, even healthy, even clothed, even speaking with a man's voice, that same village looked at him with distrust, out of the corner of their eyes, without coming near. And they had just driven away, right before his eyes, the only one who had looked at him as a human being, the only one who had asked him his name. Why would he want to stay? Why would he live among those who had written him off as lost, among those who valued their drowned pigs more than his return to life? Who, in his place, wouldn't want to get into that boat and cross the sea and start over far away, anywhere but there? He wanted to leave. He wanted to follow him. He wanted to start another life on another shore, by his side, and he told him no. He didn't let him get on. He didn't take him with him. He had granted the demons their request just a few hours earlier, and to the man he had just saved, he denied it. Hold on to that asymmetry until it truly hurts you. The only thing that man asked for in this whole story, the only thing was precisely the one thing he was not granted. Instead, he told him something else, something much harder. He told him to go back to his home, to his people, to his small village, the very same village that had bound him in heavy chains, that had feared him for years, that had just asked right in front of him for the power of God to leave that place forever. Go back to your own home, to your beloved people, and tell them everything the Lord has done for you, and how he had great compassion on you. Go back to them now. Stay right in the very place that once destroyed you. And there he is. The hardest mission in this whole story was not for the disciples who crossed the sea back to their familiar shore. It was for the man who stayed, the one who had to go back to live among those who had buried him alive, the one who would have to sit and eat with the very people who had locked the shackles on his ankles, the one who would sleep each night near the same tombs where he used to scream, not to remember his madness, but to remember every time where he had been rescued from. His healing was not in leaving, but in staying. His miracle was not crossing the sea to a new life somewhere else. It was turning the very place of his torment into the place of his testimony. To walk free on the same hillside where he had been chained, to speak with a man's voice in the same streets where only his screams had been heard, and that is exactly what he did. And so, he departed, not from the region, but for it. He began to travel throughout that land, visiting the 10 cities of the area, one by one, house by house, and road by road, telling everything that had happened to him. The man whom no one could control, whom no one could bind, and whom no one even dared to look in the eye. Now he walked freely among the people, in broad daylight, speaking. The mouth that for years had only been used to scream among the dead, now spoke among the living. And he did not keep silent. And everyone who heard him was amazed. Here ends what the story tells us about him. But the wound left by this whole story does not end. It remains open. It keeps watching us. Because think about what was left behind. The village went on with its life. Over time, it rebuilt its herds, bought more pigs, went back to counting its coins, went back to locking its doors at night, even though there was no one screaming on the hillside anymore, even though the silence of the graves was now just silence. And in the story, nothing is ever heard of them again. There is not a word nor a name. The man, on the other hand, has his story written in every city he visited. His name, his face, his testimony, repeated from mouth to mouth throughout the whole region. The village that cast him out has none of that. They chose their herd of pigs over the power of God. They preferred their accounts to their Savior, and history left them exactly where they wanted to stay, alone, in silence, with their new herds and their doors tightly closed, and their accounts, finally, balanced. Meanwhile, on that distant shore, for a very long time, there was still a heavy pile of broken iron lying among the graves, the shackles that never held him, the chains that no man ever managed to fully close around him, slowly rusting under the same hot sun, sinking little by little into the dark earth, returning to the dust from which they were once taken. No one ever needed them again. No one ever feared the hillside again. No one ever barred their door at night again. And no one wanted to remember why either. And in the end, there is only one singular haunting question that remains suspended over all of this, like the thick dust kicked up by 2,000 hooves, which takes a very long time to finally settle back to the earth and perhaps never settles at all. The demons, who knew God better than any man in that land, recognized his presence in that very first terrifying instant. They trembled before him, begged, knelt, and spoke his full sacred name and title before anyone else could say a single word. They knew with a deep and terrified certainty exactly who he was. And the men, those very men who had their own homes, their beloved families, their sacred temples and their flocks, who looked upon exactly the same God, who felt exactly the same divine power, saw the same incredible miracle, and had the same Savior standing right there on their very own shore. They pleaded with him to depart from their region. The demons believed in his power and trembled with fear. The men calculated their losses and ultimately dismissed him. So the real question, the one that truly pulses and beats beneath this whole story, is not why the demons asked to enter the pigs. The question is why. When that same power stood before an entire village of ordinary, everyday people, people like you, people like me, it was the men and not the demons who preferred that he should leave their presence. And that question is no longer just a question about them.